Good evening, everyone. Imagine for a moment a gentle summer in London, a youth full of promise. And then, in the blink of an eye, everything falls into silence. This is the story of Alice Gross, a young girl whose disappearance shook the United Kingdom and whose tragic end revealed a chilling truth. Today, we will dive into the heart of a case that, despite its official resolution, still leaves many unanswered questions. Hold on tight, because Alice's story is one of a desperate search, unexpected twists, and a dark, buried secret. Our story begins with Alice Poppy Madeline Gross, born on February 14, 2000, Valentine's Day. At the time of the events in August 2014, she was only 14 years old, but already a wellspring of creativity. Alice lived in Hanwell, in West London, with her parents, Jose and Rosalind, and her older sister, Nina. Alice was not a teenager like the others. She loved to draw, to lose herself in music, and played the piano and violin with undeniable talent. She even wrote and sang her own songs. Her voice was described as lovely. Fashion was another of her great passions. She designed her own clothes, and it is said that at only 11 years old, she had already drawn the dress she would wear to her prom 5 years later. However, behind this joyful exterior, Alice was going through a difficult time. Around the age of 13 or 14, she began to suffer from anorexia. It had made her very thin, weak, and fragile. But surprisingly, she didn't let this illness bring her down. She remained a happy and cheerful person in the company of her friends and family, savoring life. On August 28, 2014, it was summer, and Alice was on school vacation. Around 4 p.m., she decided to go for a walk. She headed toward the Grand Union Canal, a place she knew well. But that day, her walk would never end. Alice Gross was never seen again after walking along that canal. At home, Alice's parents began to worry after an hour and a half. Where was she? They tried calling her, but her phone didn't answer. Worse still, it went straight to voicemail. That meant one thing. Either the battery was dead or the phone was turned off. The parents, hoping it was just a battery issue, waited a little longer, but Alice didn't come home. Doubt settled in, then panic. After several hours without news, the family began calling everyone, friends, other relatives. No one had seen Alice since she left home that day. No message, no sign of life. It was clear that something was wrong. The family made the heartbreaking decision to go to the police to report Alice's disappearance. The police and relatives then launched an intense search around the area where Alice might have walked. They combed the streets, parks, and corners of the canal, but nothing, not the slightest trace of Alice Gross. The next day, the case took on another dimension. Alice's disappearance was picked up by the media, becoming a true public campaign. The hope was that someone had seen something. Soon, a few witnesses came forward, claiming to have seen her walking along the canal around 5 p.m. on the day she disappeared. But beyond those statements, the investigation stalled and no other concrete lead emerged. The mobilization was enormous. Friends, family members, volunteers, and police officers all scoured the streets, desperately searching for the young girl.
5 days after Alice's disappearance on September 2nd, a crucial clue was discovered. Her backpack was found abandoned on the side of the canal. The information was immediately made public in the hope that it might jog the memory of potential witnesses. And indeed, 2 people came forward, stating that they had seen the bag at that exact spot, one the day after Alice's disappearance on August 29th, and the other on the very evening she went missing, August 28th. The bag had therefore been there since the first day. Inside the bag was everything Alice usually carried with her. But one thing greatly surprised the investigators: her shoes. Why would Alice have taken off her shoes and placed them in her backpack by the side of a canal? It seemed strange, senseless. However, one thing was missing: Alice's phone. This was a crucial detail that opened up several hypotheses for the police. The first was that Alice might have run away on her own, leaving her bag behind but keeping her phone. However, this theory was quickly dismissed. Alice had neither money nor a change of clothes, and above all, no one had any idea she might have been planning to run away. Moreover, the fact that her shoes were found inside the bag made this hypothesis highly unlikely. The second hypothesis was that someone might have found the bag, gone through it, and stolen the phone. But the most worrying theory for the police was that of an abduction. If someone had taken Alice's phone and turned it off, it would be impossible to locate her, or worse, her body. A kidnapper would surely have thought of such a precaution. The police were left with no way to trace Alice, but the search for evidence and the public appeals for help continued relentlessly. Alice's disappearance deeply affected her local community. Thousands of volunteers mobilized to help with the search. Posters with her photo and description were plastered all over London and shared on social media. To show their support and raise awareness, residents tied yellow ribbons everywhere, on trees, cars, railings, and even wore them on their clothes like badges. The search for Alice Gross quickly became an operation of unprecedented scale, involving more than 600 officers from 8 different police forces across southern England. It was the largest police operation in the United Kingdom since the London bombings of 2005. Most of the search efforts naturally focused around the canal, where Alice had last been seen and where her backpack had been discovered.
Days slowly turned into weeks, and hope began to fade away. 5 long weeks after Alice went missing, on September 30th, 2014, heartbreaking news arrived. Police divers made a shocking discovery. At the bottom of the River Brent in northwest London, near the canal, they found a body. It was a woman, without clothes, tied in a curled position, covered with plastic bags, and held down by a bicycle wheel with bricks attached to it. To make the discovery harder, someone had rolled large tree trunks from the riverbank into the water, pushing the body deeper into the riverbed. It was clear that someone wanted to make sure this body would never be found. Identification was done quickly through dental records. It was confirmed to be 14-year-old Alice Gross. Her body was then taken for examination to find out what had caused her death. The examination showed that Alice had died because pressure had been applied to her chest, stopping her from breathing. There were no signs of physical abuse found on her body. However, the fact that she was discovered without clothes and tied up made investigators believe there might have been a personal or harmful motive behind the act. They could not tell whether the person responsible had changed plans or if events happened in another way. There were no visible injuries, suggesting Alice never had a chance to defend herself. The discovery of Alice's body deeply affected the whole country and completely changed the case. It was no longer about a missing person, it was a criminal investigation. Within 24 hours of finding Alice, police arrested 2 men suspected of being involved. But after several hours of questioning, they were both released without charge. The police never explained what had first led them to those men. The investigation then moved on to other directions. The police carefully reviewed security camera footage from the area where Alice was found. On one of the videos, they noticed a man who became an important suspect. He was seen arriving by bicycle, once on the evening Alice disappeared, and twice the next day, in the morning and again in the evening. That first night, he stayed there for about an hour, even though the place was empty and quiet. The next morning, he returned and stayed for almost an hour and a half, then came back that evening and stayed for 2 more hours. Meanwhile, another fact drew the attention of investigators. About a week after Alice disappeared, 3 weeks before her body was found, another man from the same area also went missing. At first, police thought he might have taken Alice and that they had left together. But after Alice was found, the search for this missing man became even more important. The man's name was Arnis Zalkalns, a 41-year-old construction worker from Latvia. That was when the story began to make sense in a very troubling way. Camera footage had captured both Alice and Arnis on the same day, just minutes apart. Alice was seen walking along the canal around 4 p.m. 5 minutes later, Arnis passed the same spot on his bicycle. Investigators believe that since Alice was walking and he was cycling, they would have crossed paths around 4:10. Alice was never seen again after that moment. As for Arnis, he appeared 18 minutes later in a nearby shop, buying 2 cans of beer. His partner later confirmed that it was indeed him on the recording.
The man who appeared 3 times on video at the place where the body was discovered was never officially confirmed to be Arnis Zalkalns. However, many clues pointed toward him. The man was riding a bicycle, and Arnis was known for always traveling by bike since he did not own a car. In addition, both Alice and Arnis lived in the same neighborhood. These details, though indirect, strongly increased suspicion around Arnis Zalkalns. The doubts about him grew even stronger on October 4, 2014. On that day, the body of Arnis Zalkalns was discovered in a local park. The police concluded that he had taken his own life. His remains, which had been there for several weeks, matched the period when Alice's body had been found. For investigators, this act seemed like a final attempt to avoid facing justice, as if he knew that the truth was about to surface. After that discovery, the investigation focused completely on Arnis Zalkalns, and police began looking deeply into his background. What they uncovered was very disturbing. In 2009, Arnis had been arrested for attacking another 14-year-old girl. A frightening coincidence. This event had taken place only 2 miles from where Alice's body would later be found 5 years afterward. The case was dropped at the time because the young victim, deeply affected, could not go through with a court process. But it was Arnis Zalkalns' past in Latvia that truly convinced investigators of his involvement. He had several previous problems with the law related to weapons and violent behavior. Even more shocking, in the late 1990s and early 2000s, he had served 7 years in prison for ending the life of his wife in Latvia. This meant that Arnis had already harmed a woman once and had also attacked another young girl. It became clear that he was capable of committing such an act again. Soon after finishing his prison sentence in Latvia, he moved to the United Kingdom, started a new relationship, and tried to rebuild his life. When police searched his home, they collected all his electronic devices, computers, phones, and storage drives for analysis. Investigators found that on September 3, 1 day before he took his own life, Arnis had searched online for information about the disappearance of Alice Gross.
During the search of his home, the police decided to dig up his recently built patio. There, they made a crucial discovery. A white iPhone, badly damaged, was unearthed. Although the serial number was missing, making 100% identification impossible, the iPhone matched the model and color of Alice's phone. Another piece of circumstantial evidence added to the case. Now the police had Arnis Zalkalns' body, they could re-examine the entire crime scene using his DNA, hoping to find a match on Alice's body or in the surrounding area. Alice and Arnis had absolutely no connection. Their ages and social circles were too far apart. If his DNA were found on her, it would be irrefutable proof. It was at this stage of the investigation that the Alice Gross case became clouded with confusion due to conflicting reports regarding DNA evidence. According to some sources, Arnis Zalkalns' DNA was found on a cigarette butt, just a few meters from where Alice's body was discovered. This would confirm his presence in the area and support the surveillance footage. Other sources went further, claiming that Arnis' DNA was found on the garbage bags used to conceal the body, on Alice's shoes, and even on her genital area. However, the video's narrator, Eleanor Neal, pointed out the lack of official evidence for these claims and expressed serious doubts. There were no defensive wounds on Alice, no signs of sexual assault, and no other obvious injuries, making it difficult to explain how his DNA could have ended up there. Other reports even stated that no DNA belonging to Arnie was found at the crime scene. The information was so contradictory that it became impossible to know what was true without an official statement from the police or a verified documentary. Moreover, a large part of Alice's clothing was never found, except for her shoes, which were inside her bag. The fact that her shoes were placed in her bag and that this bag was abandoned far from where her body was discovered remains a mystery. Why would a killer do such a thing? For what reason? The exact motives behind these actions remain unclear. Alice's naked and bound body, with no evidence of sexual assault, also raises the question of what the murderer's true intention was. Was it simply to make it easier to hide the body after the murder? Despite these uncertainties, the police reached a firm conclusion. In January 2015, they publicly declared that all the evidence pointed to Arnis Zalkalns beyond any doubt. If he had not died, he would have been charged with the murder of Alice Gross. Thus, the Alice Gross case was officially closed. The story of Alice Gross is a heartbreaking tragedy, that of a young, vibrant girl whose life was brutally cut short after crossing paths with a man with a deeply dark past. Although the case was solved by the authorities, the family's grief and the lingering questions surrounding the DNA evidence and the killer's exact motives leave a bitter aftertaste. The investigation revealed both the strength of community mobilization and the determination of the police, but it also highlighted the complexities and uncertainties that can surround the most heinous crimes. Alice Gross left this world far too soon, but her story remains a somber reminder of the fragility of innocence and the shadow that violence can cast over our lives. She endures in the collective memory as a symbol of a stolen life, a broken family, and the mystery that was resolved, yet still echoes to this day.